Given the state of the public finances, do you think that the Tories are doing what they used to call the prudent thing?
No, I don't think it's the prudent thing to be increasing taxes. I actually think it's completely the wrong measure at this time, because what the effect of tax rises is that it stagnates growth. And what we really need right now coming out of the pandemic is increased growth. And you mentioned the national insurance increase in your monologue there, Alistair. But of course, that's not just a tax on employees, it's also a tax on employers. So it's going to make the cost of hiring more expensive for businesses that have had a disastrous last 24 months. So, this is going to mean that these businesses, they're already feeling the squeeze from sort of lost incomes over the last 2 years. They're now going to be seeing the cost of hiring people more expensive. So it's going to mean that they're not going to be growing, they're not going to be employing more people, and they're not going to be increasing wages at a time when people are really struggling with the cost of living, which is only going to go up.
But given the coronavirus and pretty well unconfined spending, something had to be done on revenue raising. Otherwise, the public finances would be totally out of control.
But I don't buy the argument that the only way to raise revenue is through tax rises alone. Of course, there's by cutting taxes, you can actually raise revenue in the long term, as when people have more money in their back pockets, they feel more inclined to spend, which in turn raises more revenue over the long term. But there's also this idea that, if you want to raise more revenue, you can do it through cuts in other ways as well. I mean, the government, last year we found that the government wasted £5.6 billion. Now, that money could be used elsewhere. That could be used on helping out the NHS backlog, which we've talked about before. So I don't buy this idea that the only way to raise money is through increasing taxes.
So you're with Jacob Rees-Mogg when he is reported to have argued in the cabinet that the way forward should be to cut further spending. But putting it to you quite bluntly, what is there left to cut?
Well, as I mentioned, there's an awful lot of waste going on in government at the moment. And that's not the only area that could be changed. I mean, the private sector does contribute to the public sector. So why should the public sector be entitled to more annual leave than the private sector? If we had a cap on annual leave entitlements in the public sector, that would raise £3 billion a year. So there's lots of elements where you could sort of tweak around the edges, as it were, that would save a lot of money in the long term. And I don't think the government's really looking at these areas and trying to find out where it could save money instead of just asking the taxpayers to cough up more.
Let me ask for your comment as well on another couple of things I mentioned in that monologue, if I may. On the tax thresholds, the move lacks clarity, even honesty, of a straight rate rise. Is that philosophically damaging as much as you've argued that it's economically damaging?
Yes, and it's not just philosophically damaging, it's politically damaging as well, because we found in October, we did some polling, and it seems that the public don't trust the government on taxes anymore. The Tories are now not seen as the party of low tax. In fact, there's more people that think Labour are the party of low tax. So, this is really hitting home to a lot of people. And when the tax rises come in April, I think it's really going to politically damage the Conservative Party.
Well, add to that list, I mentioned Pat McFadden's clever observation in the monologue as well, but there's also Reform UK, New Kids on the Block, getting maybe 4%, occasionally 5% in the opinion polls. They are talking specifically about lower taxes, lower spending and less regulation. They're not going to form the next government, but they could stop the Tories forming the next government.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, there's plenty of people out there that want to vote for a party that's calling for lower tax. And if they damage the Tories in the local elections in May, then perhaps, hopefully, that will actually encourage the party to cut taxes if that does actually happen. So, we've seen cabinet ministers arguing for it, but it doesn't seem to have got anywhere. Perhaps further action needs to be taken and people need to vote with their feet and say, we don't really like what's going on at the moment. And we should be giving the Tory party a real message about what we want from our government.